We're talking about the legacy of former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, especially when it comes to the economic policies of the country. Naina Lal Kidwai, former president of FICCI and also chair India Sanitation Coalition and Rothschild India, joins us. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us on NDTV. My first question to you, how do you view Dr. Singh's economic legacy? What was that one big policy measure that, according to you, really helped the industry then?
Well, I think first and foremost was that he never left industry in doubt as to the importance he placed on business as a collaborator. He was always open for comment, listened attentively, commented, and supported. And I think that collaboration, that understanding, coming at a time when industry had been in a bit of a black box, where we had a history where government had a deep mistrust of government, really changed under the way Dr. Manmohan Singh indeed worked with industry, first as a finance minister and then also as prime minister. So the legacy he brought in was of engagement, of collaboration, and of course, a lot has been said about the liberalization and opening up that he then ensured as finance minister. As prime minister, I believe he laid the foundations which have in fact established our growth model of today. It was he who encouraged and ensured that the Aadhaar card came under implementation. He saw the benefit of that for the inclusivity that it brought. Equally, GST. In fact, I was just listening to his speech at the FICCI AGM when I came in as president. And his words were that GST is at and of the highest priority. He was quite frustrated that it was not something that he was able to bring in, and I'm talking of the year 2013. So his last year really in office. But that was a plan, a program he still wanted to work at. Equally, to establish a roadmap for India's growth at 8 to 9%. And remember, we had seen a legacy of 8%. He was seeing that it was dipping and falling, and that was something that he believed needed addressing. Right. And the third was the fiscal roadmap, which he said was, in his words, was unsustainable for India at 5.9%, and he had a roadmap for it at 3%. So always a visionary, and if you look at what we implement today, it is pretty much what he had said was necessary for us to do in 2013.
Right. Ma'am, also a section of the industry, I understand, was also skeptical about these changes that were happening post-1991. When did the industry actually realize that India's economy was going to transform, and how did seasoned, entrenched players react to something like that?
So, you're right. I remember we had a lot of discussion from a Bombay club, which was fearful of the opening up. And rightly also maybe pointing out that maybe India wasn't ready. Industry was not competitive. What was going to happen to local manufacturing if we opened up suddenly? So it was less, I think, about the direction, more about the pace. But on the other hand, our options were also quite limited. Our hands were tied. And I guess what transpired showed that not only was the policy right, but the pace was right too, because we didn't see industry collapse because of the opening up. We did see industry beginning to measure up and have to compete. And the biggest beneficiary of that is always the consumer, where we, instead of having substandard, expensive products, which were otherwise what we had as there was no choice, then get high quality and lower cost, more competitive products, which are world class. And that direction, I think, was, in hindsight, clearly the right one. But I think where Dr. Singh was amazing was his ability to collaborate. And there was so much trust and faith placed in him, whether by industry or even by opposition parties and by offshore leaders, that the trust and faith people had in him and his intellectual integrity and the person he was, I believe also really helped to get a lot of these policies off the ground because people believed in him. They believed that he wanted to do it for the country, that he was such an expert, revered as an economist,
Right.
as someone who understood what the country needed, that it became easy to follow.
Right. Also, ma'am, my last question to you. As Prime Minister, his focus was also on social security, benefits, also, these very important legislations, also farm loan waiver, food security. How did the industry look at some of these schemes and, this kind of welfare measures?
I think inclusion and inclusive growth is something that industry has also always believed in, because industry has also grown in an economy where it was fairly clear that you couldn't ignore the rest of the country that needs to also feel the progress, or have a middle class which drives demand, which in turn drives consumption, and therefore industry benefits from that growth. So anything that helped with poverty alleviation, of which India still had a fair share, to ensure that we could carry the whole country along, that the benefit of industrial growth was also felt deep into the economy in terms of growth, were, I think, which industry understood. And I do believe because of Dr. Manmohan Singh's way of being able to communicate some of this, both at an individual level and at industry chambers, which he addressed and came to, or indeed engaged with small groups of us when we visited, always open, always there to hear the criticism and the pleas, but equally to put it across what he believed. He was able to carry the nation across political parties, across sectors, to believe in what was required. And I think that is why we saw the liberalization work. And there were some very contentious areas like disinvestment, privatization,
Right.
which he chose to tackle. And there was a fair amount of debate and criticism and discussion on these. And of course, always the disbelievers. I think it is really his ability to reach out to people, and again, the trust and faith that people placed in him,
Right.
that enabled this to be a much more collaborative effort and therefore see the light of day.
Thank you so much, Naina Lal Kidwai, former president of FICCI, on those wonderful insights on the legacy that Dr. Manmohan Singh leaves behind.